Coming up, we take a look at one specific and critical player coming out of Media Day for the Brooklyn Nets, Cam Thomas. Where does he stand on his contract expectations, the role that he can play for Brooklyn, and whether or not, frankly, the team needs to be doing more around him? We dive in coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And let you know, today's episode is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And Doug, obviously, hope springs eternal when it comes to Media Day across the NBA landscape. We have a lot of guys and a lot of quotes, including Ben Simmons, deeper on Jordi Fernandez throughout this week that we will break down. But at the forefront of it all is Cam Thomas, who does feel like a critical piece in the short and potentially long-term future for the Nets.
Yeah, look, you said it. Like, when it comes to Media Day, there's no more positive day of the year. If you ever look at the positivity graph, short of just winning the championship, let's say, like, and that only happens to one team, I'm not sure on the positivity graph you get a higher data point than on Media Day when everything's cool, everyone's back. It's like, you're back from the summer, everyone's wearing their new their new duds, and it's like the first day of school vibe where everyone's feeling like this is going to be awesome. And just before we get to Cam Thomas, it's so funny too, because there's been years where we've even fallen victim to the Media Day camp positivity, where it's like, oh, I think we ended up betting like Ben Simmons to lead the league in assists because he had a couple of nice quotes about like how he was running really well with the rest of the team. And we were like, you know what we should do? Let's bet that he leads the league in assists and KD or Kyrie leads the league in scoring. That's how great the quotes are. So the Cam Thomas thing we'll get to, but I just did think that I always think it's funny when we, after having done this for many years, I know the vibes even for us on Media Day are like pretty astounding.
Oh, there's an ambrosia to the vibes that come out of a Media Day, to the willingness to buy in. And in our own defense, these past few seasons prior to where we are now with the Brooklyn Nets, there were times when, hey, there were real championship odds or real opportunities to win. I think sometimes you have to see that writing on the wall for organizations that are going through changes, not unlike getting back to school and you feel like maybe you grew 6 inches and you can't quite fit into your clothes. The Brooklyn Nets couldn't fit into their roster and into those personalities over those years. But we will talk about Ben Simmons more later in this week when we talk about Media Day, because he's having himself a bit of a tour as well, coming back feeling fully healthy. However, Cam Thomas was in front of the microphone. And I mean, listen, we've talked about him obviously a ton this offseason. We know where the numbers are. We know where we are in most improved player odds. But when we think about first and foremost, do we want to go contract and say where he stands coming into this season and kind of the two-way street between organization and player? Or we also have the component of Jordi Fernandez, who is discussing how he can improve his game, which I will say that is a critical element to where Cam Thomas is in his career. Having a head coach that seems to be talking about not what he needs to do, as in Cam Thomas, to get more playing time, to have an expanded role. It's how do I make him a better player? So we've at least finally moved beyond the point of questioning whether or not the organization likes to play Cam Thomas and if he'll have a large role this year. Fernandez took care of that for us early on.
Yeah, Jordi Fernandez gave like some pretty interesting specifics on Cam Thomas and like what he'd obviously seen from him through tape or just like his own understanding of Cam Thomas's game, and talking about wanting to create like a more efficient environment for Cam Thomas, which, I mean, we're always going to be all for. They did ground down into specifics around, dribbling and how he was, way more efficient when he, took no dribbles, and then the efficiency decreased with every dribble. That's not like groundbreaking statistics, because most people, when they dribble a lot, are going to get less efficient, but it is important for a guy like Cam Thomas, who presumably is going to have the ball in his hands a lot. And I think what they're probably trying to get out ahead of here is quick decision making, because sometimes dribbling is a byproduct or a leading indicator of like decision making and how quickly it's happening, right? Like no dribbles means you made a really quick decision. Lots of dribbles means maybe that decision wasn't as quick, right? And the graph kind of points in that direction. So it's good to hear that. And if the goal is going to be sort of like a more efficient offense built around Cam Thomas, with the goal of like getting him to get up quick shots or ball out of his hands quickly, with like sort of down chain efficiency for other players, that is a really encouraging sign, and probably the number one way to probably expand his offensive game, which is already really, really good.
Yeah, and again, like, just to have a clear directive from the organization about wanting to help him improve and not thinking about any other aspect of where he needs to be better to be a better player for us versus he's already a good player. Now let's make him a better player, right? And that's something that I think at this point, after the season he had last year, if you're coming in as Jordi Fernandez, you just need to walk in the door with a clear understanding of what you can accomplish for him. Now, Cam Thomas had quotes when it comes to, as you mentioned, the efficiency there and what it looks like, or how that unfolded during the course of the game. Because he, in effect, I'll summarize, basically said, like, yeah, there's also moments in the game when 5 seconds left on the shot clock and everyone's looking at me to do something. So what am I supposed to do at that point? There was an interesting thing to this, and I'm not saying it as a negative towards Cam Thomas at all, but he clearly, throughout media day and throughout the offseason, and I mean this in a positive way, because he has accomplished enough to warrant some respect in regards to his game. He clearly is feathering both lines of, I want to improve, I want to get better. Also, here's some reasons why, if some things haven't looked so good for me, that it's been the team problem. It's been the overall roster construction. It's been what's going on around me. And guess what? Like, I don't want to blow anyone's mind here. A lot of guys that think they're on the edge of being superstars or being really high level players in the league, they all feel this way, because none of them walk out on the court thinking, oh, I hope the other players that are better than me can help me have a good game tonight. Cam Thomas obviously is walking into the season with a mentality of, I am good enough. I'm probably better than I've been able to show over these last couple of seasons.
Yeah, his quote was pretty funny, because, and I'll read it here in a second, but the quote's funny because it acknowledges that, like, this is the case around efficiency, but it also acknowledges that, probably correctly, honestly, that he might not have been working with like a full complement of weapons at his disposal, i.e. teammates that were going to help, or a system that was going to help those things like you sort of really flourish. I want to read that quote, but it's a little bit longer. We'll read that here in just 1 second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at FanDuel. Look, you want to get into the NFL season, you want to get into the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. When you get you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you want to get something that live in-game betting, you can check out the latest stats. If you view the live play-by-play, so much more on the same page where you're making your bets. Look, FanDuel has you covered completely. And when I say covered completely, I mean you could take days to go through everything that they have offered, from just the overall game lines to the first half, second half stuff, to the in-game props. It's all there for you on FanDuel. NFL, obviously NBA around the corner. Also, you're going to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, we of course remind you, make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, let's head over to Locked On NBA. Provides daily basketball analysis from the national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained, frankly, as Locked On NBA after Locked On Nets. And it's available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And it's your team, and it's every single day. All right, hit the quote from Cam Thomas as we continue to expand on what our takeaways are from Media Day. And clearly, Cam Thomas feels like, I get it, efficiency matters. Also, who you're playing with matters in terms of being as productive as possible.
For sure. And he does have another interesting quote we'll get to later about his contract. But in response to Jordi Fernandez talking about helping Cam being a more efficient scorer, where Jordi Fernandez said his superpower is to score the ball, and what we need to do is help him do that in an efficient way. Cam Thomas, I'll read this quote and just everyone can sort of internalize this. I do see what Jordi Fernandez says, because I think that's what everyone knows. Efficiency goes up when you take less dribbles. But at the same time, we got to look at the context of when I do take all the dribbles, like when I get the ball at the end of the clock, or when I get the ball at the end of the possession. Most of the time, when I take most of those dribbles, it's 5 seconds left and everyone's just looking at me to go one-on-one. So, I mean, at that point, I'm like, what do you want me to do? I mean, this is like, I could have just summed this Cam Thomas quote up by saying, he's saying, hey, when you hand me the grenade, like, what do you want me to do? Right. It's getting chucked, right? Like, right. I'm going to run around a little bit with it, and then it's going to get thrown away. And he's basically just saying that the team struggled on offense. No one else could do anything. They'd give him the ball near the end of the shot clock. We saw this happen a million times. Like, he would get the ball at the end of the shot clock. And at that point, you're not running a new set. You're just saying, hey, hot potato, here you go. Enjoy it. And it was probably their best. Frankly, at that point, it really probably was their best chance to score because he was easily the best scorer on the team, like by far. And so it's an interesting admission around it. Sometimes I wish these quotes would be like a little bit more subtle, but I'm not really going to drag him for it because he is correct, and I guess honesty is the best policy here. But I do, no, there's no buts. I don't know. What did you think when you read it? He's not wrong. He's 100% right in this assessment.
Yes, first and foremost, 100% right. The second part of it is go back to last season. Remember, this isn't. I'm not here to throw shade on the departed Mikal Bridges, but it was also Mikal Bridges was brought in to be the leader of this new version of this thing for the Brooklyn Nets, and he wasn't that guy. So just when you talk about late shot clock opportunities and what you're looking to do and the players around you, guess what? There weren't a lot of better options, and this is true of any NBA team. But I'm sure that Cam Thomas felt this at times too. You look around the roster, well, Cam Johnson, when he's healthy and on the floor, he's a spot-up three-point shooter primarily. Nicholas Claxton, his offensive game. You look at any of these players, and we saw how diminished the mid-range game became and the ability to go at the basket for Mikal Bridges last year as well. So you're also surrounded by guys in Cam Thomas's defense, so to speak. You're surrounded by guys that can't do anything. I mean, they can spot up shoot, but when you get late in shot clocks, there was nobody else on this roster that was taking guys off the dribble, even in a, hey, pitch me the grenade. I'll do a two-step dribble, sidestep, fade away. I'll get a shot off. And if you're Cam Thomas, you wish he maybe phrases it differently. But when it gets pitched to you with 5 seconds left, you go, yeah, I am the best. I'm the only option. Whatever's going to happen next, it was the best thing that we possibly could have accomplished here. Now, as the season progressed, we talked about it last year. Can you get better with blitzing defenses and double teams and identifying where to get that ball out of your hands? Because even if you didn't have the best supporting cast last year, and you're not going to have the best supporting cast this year, sometimes quick, as you were mentioning before, quick IQ, processing the game, and moving the basketball is just going to end up with Nicholas Claxton, with Day'Ron Sharpe, with Trendon Watford, somebody just kind of standing in or around the basket, mostly open, and then it's their responsibility. And I think that probably is something that we look at with Cam Thomas this year and say, are you willing and capable to make the right basketball play? And we've seen him do this. So I'm not saying this is, going to be groundbreaking for him. Make the right basketball play and trust that Jordi Fernandez and the coaching staff are going to look at it and say, you did the right thing. Results do not matter in this, right? Missed shots, missed opportunities, fumbled opportunity. Okay, fine. As long as you make the right basketball play, then we look at you as someone who is continuing to take the next step in his development and understands. Then when it comes to late shot clocks, we do want you to take those big moments, but we do need you to make more often than not the right basketball play, even if it feels like the results are diminished when it's out of your hands.
And I wonder too if that's going to be the core piece that they look at when it comes to some of these contract extensions too, which we'll talk about. Like are the Nets going to feel more comfortable with a longer term contract if they see some of that identification on the court of right play? Hey, we understand the rest of the talent here is just not up to snuff. That's by design in this case. But we need to see that we need to see that you're making basketball decisions as if it's going to be those guys on the court. Like it's going to be Cooper Flagg. It's going to be Ace Bailey. It's going to be, one of the Boozer guys. We have to understand that even though right now you're not passing to, or you're not working with all-star caliber players by any stretch of the imagination, is it in your range of outcomes that it can happen? Yeah. And sometimes that might be doing things differently than he's done in the past, which is, take a lot of dribbles and put up a tough shot. Again, yeah. I'm not blaming him. I would do the same thing. The team could not score a single basket, and it didn't look like they were running really any semblance of a cohesive offense. It's not his fault. But if you believe in Jordi Fernandez, that he's going to be able to institute a better structure overall, that there's going to be, even if the players are changing, that there's going to be more consistency among just at least the overall offensive structure, and you can trust that's going to be the case, then are we seeing growth? And I really do think that's going to matter for him. Like, I think we have to see him expand the offensive game a little bit. I'm actually just looking through the eyes of the Nets. Like, I think they're going to probably want to see that. And if they don't see it, I do wonder how much they are going to want to get into a long-term sort of deal with him, or if they're going to disagree about the money down the line, because if they don't see it, and the attitude says that it's like he doesn't think he needs to change, right? About how the game is played, then I'm not sure how that's going to go.
So one thing is process good, results bad. That's the synthesized version of it. And you'll hear us talk about that throughout this season because it's about a low win total, but a lot of guys developing. The other component would be just thinking about the roster around him. Listen, whatever the roster was a year ago with a lot of veterans, it didn't pan out. You can think about the upside of some guys like a Noah Clowney and how him being on the court as opposed to just Nicholas Claxton or as opposed to Claxton and Dorian Finney-Smith. There's versions of this thing where on an individual level, Cam Thomas's game can be put in a position to get better. But I do find it fascinating because when you mention the contract, if the Brooklyn Nets, we talked about this as well throughout the offseason. We know next year, Ben Simmons' contract comes off the books. You're going to need to still occupy cap space. So it might be easy. Not unlike decision-making around Nicholas Claxton. We can give out these contracts because they'll still be movable and because we need to pay out and meet the salary floor. But there's a big difference between, and this isn't a knock on Cam Thomas. Again, I can't try to be more clear about it. There's a difference between Nicholas Claxton, defensive-minded player who has been with the organization and been rewarded in that way. There is a world where you run the risk of paying Cam Thomas a big contract, then still demanding it and wanting more of his game. And if it doesn't get there, justifiably, maybe Cam Thomas saying, well, what do you want me to do with the talent around me? Like the disgruntled player narrative, I think could come out if you don't hit the lottery the way you want to next year. If the team doesn't take the next step going forward, because you're already in that block. Cam Thomas is already going into his 4th year of his career and trying to explain why it hasn't been awesome from day one, why it's taken so long for him to get on the court. We think it's mostly organizational and coaching failures, but that narrative is not going to go away even after you give him the big deal.
And by the way, he's got a great quote about this, which I think is kind of instructive to look into like sort of the mindset. And I think it's interesting. We'll get into that final Cam Thomas quote here in just one second. First, going to tell you about our friends over at Gametime. Look, you're going to the sporting event, maybe a basketball game, football game coming around sooner than later. Maybe it's the concert, maybe it's the comedy, maybe it's the theater, whatever it is. You want to make sure you're getting into Gametime picks where they're getting tickets for your favorite live event even easier. It's going to filter out the fluff, show you all the incredible deals and the great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching around through thousands of tickets. You're going to find the best seats, you're going to find the best deals, and you're going to be ready to go. You want to spend your time, just getting yourself to the arena, getting yourself to the theater, not worried about just what it takes to buy tickets. Gametime, you can get curated deals. It makes it easier to find the best prices on great seats. You get the super deals. You can see the seats before you see seat views before you even buy. They got the lowest price guaranteed as well. Gametime picks curation makes it even easier to save on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, all of it. Download the Gametime app. Create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
All right, so as we round out today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Cam Thomas, talking about Media Day overall, and obviously how it connects to the short term for the Brooklyn Nets and what we project to be a team developmental season, and then the long term, which of these young players will be a part of the core going forward. We talk about the contract extensions. You talk about the quote, Doug. Break down what Cam Thomas had to say when it comes to finally being in the place where the organization, if they choose, can enter the negotiations with him right now and give him that contract extension that I'm sure he's waiting for.
Yeah, so he was commenting on Sean Marks and looking at the contract, which could be coming, or any negotiations they're having. So this is the Cam Thomas quote. This is Sean Marks. He's looking for pieces to build with, but at the same time, I feel like I have really nothing to prove. I've proven myself countless times in my tenure here. If there's any more proving to do, then I really don't know what to say. I'm going to go out there, play the best I can, and help the team win as much as I can. This is the quote. These are the quotes where I'm like, I just wish the touch was just a bit, just like slightly softer.
Yeah. And again, you think about superstars, and this is also probably maybe putting too much on Cam Thomas's plate at this point of his career to a certain extent. Kevin Durant, LeBron James, all of the elites of the elites, when it comes to contract negotiations, well, they know that they have all the power. So you're kind of capable of saying all the right things when you're asked about it. And it doesn't matter whether or not it's window dressing or otherwise, because behind the scenes, you're probably holding them over the coals and you're saying, listen, like, you want to lose me? You want to risk losing me? Whereas with Cam Thomas, to your point, we know he had a great season a year ago. We know that we believe that he can be a contributor into the core of this team, but because the Nets are now finally going into the rebuild mode that we asked for a season and a half, you can envision a world where he doesn't fit it, where it doesn't make sense for the Nets to give him the contract, where it doesn't make sense to occupy whatever that number may look like. And frankly, we still don't know where is the value for Cam Thomas, as we had talked about previously this summer. Some executives maybe just saying, we're unsure. That could be because we don't watch him enough. We're not paying attention to Brooklyn, but also because a pure scorer with maybe other areas of deficiency in his game is hard to hand out a big, sizable 3-4 year extension to when it comes to it. And on the Sean Marks side of it, I'll just add this into it before you jump back in. They asked him about it in terms of the extension for him. Technically, Day'Ron Sharpe also is available for that. And Sean Marks said, the window will certainly close on extensions if we can't get something done. But I think it's important for those players to know that we care about them. Classic Sean Marks line. Whether the timing is right this year or if it's next offseason, from an organizational standpoint and also from their standpoint, they'll be weighing up what we're doing just the same as we're going to be figuring out if they're the right fit long-term and so forth. And if now is the right time to extend all of our guys. So in Cam Thomas's defense, it's not like Sean Marks came to the table with a ton of, we believe in this player. Yeah. We're excited for this season for him, and we're excited to get to the negotiation table. That has been a theme since the day they drafted him, which we've always wondered why you drafted him if you seem to have an immediate conflict about how you value him and if you believe he can be a piece for you going forward for this organization.
Yeah, it's not only on the player to say the right things here or to always say, to always be just happy to be there and going to say they're going to do their best. It's a little more industry standard, right? Where they typically, that is the answers that most people give, but it's not, you're not forced to, and you don't have to. And maybe that's what sometimes when I read the Cam Thomas quotes, I'm more building it off of oh, what would a player usually say, even if it wasn't correct or not. I still think I would probably default to higher ground only because that to me seems helpful. And that's the kind of way I live. But look, this is, there's no correlation between any of my situations and Cam Thomas. So I'm being very, very clear about that. And it's not like the team has, and you're right. It's not like the team has made a long-term commitment to him in a way where he should be oh, I hope they do. Let's cross your fingers, right? It's if he's just saying, hey, look, I've done everything I've ever needed to do. I've been kind of jerked around here for years. I've never known what the role was, even until very, very recently. Again, started only 75% of the games last year or something like that. Yeah. And they've never really shown any commitment to me, whether it's the front office or the coaching staff, multiple coaching staffs or whatever. So what am I going to do? Sit here and be I'll do my best. I hope they give me a contract. I probably wouldn't say the same anything. He is a slightly mercurial guy. And so it also comes off a little bit like that. And he has been since day one. And that's also just totally fine. But you're right in that, hey, I don't really owe the organization anything either here. They've made it kind of hard for me to get a lot better, right? Yeah. Between inconsistent playing time, inconsistent roles, inconsistent offense, inconsistent coaching. It's inconsistency across the board, and inconsistency being super nice. And there's other words that it's way worse. And so, yeah, he just doesn't really owe it to the organization. The question is, though, it still remains unclear what the contract situation would look like from some other team that is out there that values him. We are not clear on that. We are not clear on how other organizations value or don't value his skills. And that's where being a little more middle of the road could help him, because it's not just there's just one organization you have an option with. There's 29 other teams out there that are going to read quotes like this too and want to sort of know what they're getting into business with. And I think that is kind of important.
No, 100%. And again, maybe it plays itself out this season where we finally, from both sides, from the organization and from the player, we get it. And I will say, we are getting more of Cam Thomas's personality, and you could see it a little bit even at the end of last season. I like hearing it, whether or not it's totally polished from him. I like the fact that he's willing to, at this point of his career, with an extension on the line, he's willing to say, hey, I feel like I'm getting better. I feel like I'm doing what I can do. It also matters what's going on around me. And the organization is culpable in that, which is always what we said these last few seasons of, it's hard to kind of gauge. It's hard to kind of give clear perspectives on a lot of players, a lot of coaches, and on GMs in Sean Marks when the pivots, soft, delayed, misguided, seem to come in a bit of a jumbled process for this team. So Cam Thomas gets caught up a little bit in the middle. The one thing I will say to close out is a positive from him when we talk about the overall win total projection, for the Brooklyn Nets this season. And a lot of guys talked about this, especially the young core players. But Thomas said, I can't speak for anybody else, but I look at the low win projection as motivation. I've always been doubted, like ever since I started playing basketball. So whenever I see something like that, I always just laugh. I keep a mental note in the back of my head, just try to prove everybody wrong. That's how I feel, how I use everything as motivation for myself and the team. So definitely laugh, but it's in the back of my mind as motivation. I'll go ahead and prescribe that in the back of his mind, the motivation is less about the overall win total projections for the Nets, but the fact that the organization is not willing to commit to him on a contract extension. If you want to read between the lines of that particular response, it's, yep, here I am. You guys drafted me. And ever since then, it seems like you don't trust me. It seems like you don't want me to be a part of this core going forward. And I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. So even if he's letting a few more honest notes come out, I think there's some things going on here in the background that'll be very interesting to see as this season progresses in what could be a very hard one for the team overall. Can Cam Thomas start to maybe become a little bit of that leader that puts a good face and says some of the right things in front of the cameras for a team that's going to be having a lot of losses?
All right, we're going to get out of here. We're going to talk more about the Ben Simmons stuff that came out of training camp, some other really interesting, not training camp, media day, other media day quotes. We'll plenty to talk about the rest of the week. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to the podcast. Make sure you subscribe to YouTube as well.
Do not follow where the path may lead. Go instead where there is no path and leave a trail. Why, that is Ralph Waldo Emerson.
One of the all-time great poets. We're back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.